Welcome to Love Talk. I'm Gregory Morgan. I'm here today on Love Talk to speak about love. And what I want to speak about is love as a verb, love as an action that you take in your life, regardless of how you feel. So the questions I would ask for you is, where is love missing in your life? Where is love missing that used to be there and now it's gone? I'd like for you to look and see if there's areas where love is missing, or that where there was a feeling of love and now there's a knowledge of love and yet no feeling of love remains. So I believe that each of us have times like that in our lives, and experiences like that in our lives. And I'd like you to look and see also, where is love missing that if it was present in that relationship, in that situation, whether it be at work or at home, in your own life, or in your relationship with yourself, where is love missing? And if it was present, what difference would it make? Maybe it would make all the difference in the world. Maybe it would make no difference at all. Really just take a look and see where love is missing, and if it were there, what difference would it make in your life? Those are the questions that I'd like to examine with people today. And also, in the examination of that, what's going to really come up is that people believe that love is something that you can give and something that you can receive, almost as if it was a commodity. And for some of you, it may exist as if it were a place, like I fell into love. I used to be in love, like if you were in a room or a stadium or a closet, whatever love looked like for you in terms of its size. Yeah, I was in love and now I'm out of love, or I'm not in love. So for some people, love is a state of being or a state of mind. It's an emotional state. I'm not saying that it's any of those things. I'm attempting to define with you, how does love exist for you? And when you say that I'm in love, what are you really talking about? What does it really mean to you to be in love? And, there are people who say, well, I've been in love with this person for years, but you never see them, you never talk to them, you don't know what kind of person they've become because you haven't seen or talked to them for years, and yet you're in love with them. So what is that about? Because you couldn't actually, I challenge that, because you couldn't actually be in love with the person because you haven't seen them, you don't know who they are. I've seen some people after 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, while I still had a feeling of love for them, who they had become was an entirely different human being. And so I realized that I was in love with a past them, an image of them from the past, an ideal or a thought that I had in my mind, an image accompanied by words, feelings, and thoughts. So an idealization of what that person was, and I was in love with that idealization. But when I saw the actual factual person in front of me, it was an entirely different person. And so I had to re-examine, do I really love that person as they are today, with all of the things that they have now that they didn't have then, and all of the things that are missing now that weren't missing then? Do I still love them now? And so, or do I still have the feelings of love? So these are the kind of questions I'd like for you to examine in the looking at your relationships in Love Talk today. Take the time to really look in your life and see, where's love missing, where it used to be and now it's not, and where's love missing where if it were there, it'd make all the difference in the world. What I'm going to propose to you is that love is a verb. Love is something that you do whether you feel it or not. So let's look at that together. What is the doing of love? There's the being of love, and that's pretty effortless, really. When you're being in love, when you are being a source of love, and many of you, I think probably the easiest place for you to look might be for your love for your children. That's a kind of love that we spontaneously feel an identification with and an affinity for another human being. So it's easier for us to feel that often with our children than with maybe even our mate or our friends or our parents, right? But it's a natural affinity that comes from being biologically and emotionally connected with somebody and identifying with them. But I'm going to propose that there's something even more than that. In your children, I'm going to propose you see some kind of future whether consciously or unconsciously. You are seeing some kind of future, and given the nature of humanity, we imagine a future that is, we have a tendency to imagine a future that is actually better than, or that turns out better than, logic or the current circumstances would lead us to believe. So we have a tendency to be to think positively about the future, to look hopefully towards the future, and I propose that when you are feeling this spontaneous affection and love for your children, that coupled with that a part of, bound up in that, is an unquestioned wanting or longing for, a desire for, and a will for a positive, empowering future for those children. Now that's kind of a mouthful, but isn't it easier to imagine that for your children or for your family than it is for, say, a married mate who we think, well, their future's their future. Of course, you want a positive future for them, but it's not as necessarily bound up with your relationship, with the kind of love that you feel for a mate, or even for a sibling, or for a parent. So maybe it's necessary to redefine. I know that for some of you who've been watching this show for some time, you've probably heard me say some of these definitions before, but I think it's important to redefine and just point out that there are different levels or kinds of love when we're talking about love. Everybody uses this one word, but it means a multitude of things depending on who you're talking about and who you're talking to. So I want to just define some of the levels or categories of love that people are aware of. One is an unconditional love, that is the love of like a parental love, a love of a parent for their child. That love can be even more unconditional for let's say, a mother than it is for a father. Mothers will love you unconditionally. You're part of their body. You're part of their, they gave birth to you through their own body. Whereas a father's love can be a little bit more detached. I'm not saying that it's not unconditional, but there may be conditions under which your father would not show you his love, where he would be blocked from expressing his love to you. Therefore, I'm saying that father's love, while it may be unconditional, there may be some conditions attached to it. Okay, so there's the parental love, the love of a parent for a child, tends to be unconditional. And then there's filial love, the love of a peer. So that is the fraternal love of a brother and sister, love of a worker, a friend, a buddy, a partner, a girlfriend, that is platonic. So this is another form of love that is a platonic love. It does not involve sexuality. Okay, once sexuality enters into the game, it's a different kind of love. So, but this doesn't involve sexuality. It is a platonic love, simply a love for a equal, somebody who's on the same level, if you will, as you are in your own life. The love of a parent, by the way, is the love of a superior towards an inferior. Now, don't get caught up in those words. A parent is superior to an infant. A parent has capabilities and capacities that the child doesn't, and therefore it is a superior being caring for, taking care of an inferior being until that being can, providing and protecting for that inferior being until that being can become an equal. Whereas fraternal love is love for an equal. And then there is erotic love, eros, and that is a love that involves, I'm going to put it very simply, if not crudely, it involves any exchange of bodily fluid. Okay? Anytime that there are the mucous membranes of your body touching with another's, that is sex. Okay? Regardless of what you call it, it is sexual, and it is sex, and it is erotic. So anything that has that's kind of juicy is sexual love, and as soon as there's sexual love, then the game changes. Okay, it's no longer love between two equals, although you may be unequal people living on an equal standard of life. You are no longer equal. There is a masculine and a feminine. There is a giver and a receiver. There is all of the primordial hormones and peptides that rush through your neurological system at that time in erotic love are deeply, deeply connected with survival. So survival comes into play as soon as sexuality comes into play. it becomes a life or death type of situation in many unspoken ways. For sex, in sexuality or in sexual love, for example, it was not uncommon throughout the ages, up until really pretty recently in human history, it was not uncommon for women to die during childbirth. That's a pretty life or death situation. On the other side, on the masculine side, when a man took on the responsibility of a child and a woman, he then became willing to put his life at stake to protect them and to provide for them, and routinely did so when he went hunting, or when he went to war, or when he went out to bring back whatever protection or provision that he could for that wife and child in whom he saw his future. He saw a future with them that as a man alone he couldn't see. A man alone sees a certain type of future, but it is a disposable future. It is a future that he could do without. It is a future that if he lost that future, he's willing to sacrifice that future for something greater. That's why men have always been willing to give their life for their country, for their village, for their family. They are willing to dispose of their own future in order to provide and protect something greater than themselves. So a man alone doesn't see his future as something necessarily worth giving his life for. And so as soon as there is erotic love, as soon as there is love in which a man begins to see his future in the eyes and arms, in the heart, if you will, of a woman and a child, then his life changes permanently and very, very, very fundamentally. Who he is shifts and changes into another type of being. It's no longer I, it is we or us. And he reconstitutes himself internally, mentally and emotionally, and psychologically and spiritually, to become something other than what he was in the past. So erotic love changes everything. It's a game changer, all right? And people all too often have the erotic love before they've even experienced actual love of an equal, or actually loving. They experience the sexuality without the love, and then they call it love because they've had good sex. And so good sex does not equal good love. It may be true that good love equals good sex. That may be true. Worth exploring, isn't it? However, good sex does not necessarily equal good love. It doesn't necessarily equal lasting love. And so part of the purpose of the discussion that I'm having with you today is to really discuss with you, how do you create ongoing love? Like, what is that? How is it that people can have a love that lasts a whole lifetime, something that generations before us have had? Very, very few people in our current generations have marriages that last beyond 10 years. 10 years is considered a long-term relationship, even by the courts, even by the divorce courts. There's what you have to pay if you've been married 10 years or less, and after 10 years, there's what you have to pay. Okay? It's considered a long-term relationship. So even in a court of law, it's recognized that most relationships, most marriages, if they're going to get divorced, usually do so before 10 years, within the first 10 years. Interesting to note that, so it may have started off with love, it may have started off with good sex, it may have started off with honor and integrity, and it may have started off with an unconditional willingness to do whatever it takes to make this love work. All of those things may have been true in the beginning. And then as people get together and stay together and grow together, what begins to show up is all of the hidden parts of ourselves that we never have been obliged to look at. We've never been forced to look at. And long-term committed relationships force you to look at those limitations in your own self. Now, all too often we see the limitations in the other one, in our partner, loud and clear. We could tell you everything about our partner's limitations and very little about our own. And so when we become challenged, it's all too often, it looks like they're the problem. And that's when what we called love in the past begins to fall apart. It begins to disintegrate. Whatever was holding it integrous, in other words, holding it integrated together, begins to disintegrate. Those presuppositions that we had based our love upon began to show up to be false suppositions. In other words, we supposed certain things would be true. We supposed that the future would turn out a certain way, that this person would always look this way, or always touch me in that way, or always speak to me in that way, or always do those things for me that they did before, and that I would always feel this way. We supposed that in the beginning. That's what I mean by the word presupposition, to presuppose something. In other words, you made it up. You made it up that that would happen. You imagined it. You supposed it to be true, you see? And so people fall in love, or what they call love, get into relationships and have children and invest in real estate based on something that they supposed would happen. It was supposed to happen. And then they go around telling each other, you were supposed to be this way. You were supposed to never do that. But it doesn't ever turn out that way. So the question becomes, and that I want to address with you, is how do you continue to generate and cause love, affinity? By affinity, I mean affection, a desire to be with, to touch, to enjoy, to speak with, to be close with another human being. How do you generate that on an ongoing basis when you don't feel like it, when bad things have been said, when issues haven't been resolved, when the supposed future didn't turn out like you thought it would? How do you be a self-possessed human being that can continue to love irregardless of those circumstances? Now, some people would say, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to do that? Well, I can tell you why. Because the rewards of learning the answer to that question, the rewards of actually being able to master the ability to cause and generate love in your life regardless of the circumstances, the answer to that question is far more deeply rewarding, far more powerful. It lends itself to becoming a far more influential human being that actually makes a difference and leaves a legacy of a life worth living for future generations. The answer to that question is far more enriching than its alternative, which is, why would I even want to do that? I'll answer that question. And consider the alternative if you don't answer that question. You could always go back to dating. You could always go back to looking for an apartment. You could always go back to trying to find somebody else to have sex with you. You could always go back to finding some way to support and take care of your children or your household or your business without a partner. You could always go back to that. And I promise you that the answer to that situation is not nearly as enriching. In fact, a lot of people don't do well in those situations. So when you consider the alternatives to not answering the question, how do you generate love no matter what? Most people are trying to get some love, and in order to do that, they'll do just about anything. Their behavior will even be manipulative, demanding, seductive, inquisitive. Why don't you love me? Or if you don't love me, I'm leaving. So there's various different ways that people are always attempting to get fulfilled something that is fundamental to all human beings. Yes, we need food, clothing, and shelter, but beyond the survival necessities of our lives, human beings need to feel that they are appreciated, loved, that they belong, I'll say, instead of saying they, I'll say we. We need to feel that we belong. We need to feel that we're appreciated. We need to feel that we are a part of something, whether that something be a family or a community or the world or even just a partnership. But we need to feel like something other than ourselves so that we don't feel alone. We're interesting human beings in that we actually need time to be alone. We need solitude, but at the same time, not at the same time, other times I will say, we need the company of other human beings. So it breathes, you breathe. There's times of aloneness and times of participation. There's times of intense activity and acting in the world, and then there's times of repose and pulling back into oneself and recollecting one's senses and re-examining oneself and reflecting and becoming the source of something before you go out into the world and express that something. So in terms of relationships, in terms of being the source of love, let's talk about that. Being the source of love has to do with actually doing and being loving things each and every day as a discipline, whether you feel like it or not. You won't always feel like loving. However, if you can create the discipline, just like when you go to the gym, you don't always feel like going to the gym, but you go anyhow because you see a future for yourself. I assert that you go to the gym because you see a future for yourself in which you are healthy, whatever, you're thin or you're fit, and you see a future for yourself in which that is self-fulfilling. The act in and of itself is self-fulfilling, of going to the gym and getting fit. So the same thing is true for loving. You don't always feel like loving. You get up in the morning, you may feel grouchy, you may feel whatever, right? But can you discipline yourself to love yourself in the mirror, to actually be with yourself in the mirror and give yourself some acknowledgement and appreciation rather than that critical voice that's always inside? Can you give yourself the kind of love it takes, if you're single and living alone, to clean up the place and make your own bed, and even go out and get some flowers for your apartment. Do something nice that you would give to somebody that you loved, so that you begin to practice the acts of loving, because loving is an act. It's a verb. It's something that you do whether you feel like it or not. I keep repeating that because I don't think people get it, okay? And it means that you love yourself first. Really, whether you're a man or a woman, it means that you take care of yourself first, and then once you're handled, and listen, there should be a point at which your life is handled. If you're truly taking care of yourself and taking care of your life, there should be a point, and that point should not be like when you're 60, okay? That point should be at some place around in your 20s or 30s where you've kind of handled your finances, you've handled your physicality, like, okay, I'm physically well, all right, I'm not sick or addicted to something or needing somebody to take care of me. You should be well. Okay, those are the years in which you should be at the peak of your health. So you should be physically well. You should be loving yourself in such a way that you're doing whatever spiritual practice would best empower you, whether that is meditating, whether it's going for hikes. Going for a hike can be a spiritual practice. Sitting on the beach, staring at the ocean, whether it's praying, whether it's reading scriptures or meditation books or spiritual leader books. I don't care what you do, as long as it feeds you spiritually, so that your heart is enriched, so that your mind is enriched, so that your compassion for yourself and for others is at least something that you consider and think about every day. It should become a discipline for you, so that you wouldn't go out of your house and enter into the world without first having some form of spiritual practice that enriches your life on a very personal level, just between you and God, you and the universe, whatever it is that has you be connected as a human being to something greater than yourself, so that you're just not outwardly focused all the time. There's the inward focus that I mentioned, self-reflecting, looking inwardly, loving yourself, and then there's your outward focus in the world. You need both. Then when you go out into your day, you're going to meet people that are not in a loving state. Can you practice, in spite of how that may feel at the moment, when somebody cuts you off at the freeway, or somebody takes your place in line, or somebody makes a rude remark to you, or somebody, I don't know, tries to cheat you or something like that? Can you practice by simply asking yourself, what would be the loving thing to do? What would be the thing to do that would bring the practice of love to this situation? How might this turn out if I could relate to this in a loving way? And listen, sometimes the most loving thing you could do is to tell a person where to get off. Like, hey, I don't put up with that. Don't do it, or there'll be consequences. You can say that lovingly. You can be firm and loving. Loving doesn't mean, going around sticking flowers in the rifle barrels that are pointed at you, as like we did back in the hippie days, and people are still doing. It doesn't mean that you have to get in the face of aggression and love it. You don't have to be a demonstrator for love. However, I suggest that you practice it in your own life, that you ask yourself at least, what are the alternatives when you're in a confronting situation? How can I bring love to this situation? And in doing so, you begin to develop a muscle. You begin to develop a psychological, emotional, spiritual, mental muscle to begin to respond in a loving way to your life. And in doing so, you expand your possibilities, you expand who you know yourself to be. You come to know yourself as a loving person, as a compassionate person, as a person who is the source of something. And here's the thing. You've been doing this all your life anyhow. You have been training the people in your life how to respond to you. Since you were a kid, you've been training your world how to respond to you. You've been training people that some of you throw fits and throw temper tantrums, and you've trained your world. Don't get that person mad. Don't get them upset. You better not upset me. That's what you've been telling the world. I will become angry and aggressive and difficult to deal with if I don't get what I want. That's what you've been training people, for those of you who have that modality. There's others of you who have been training people to relate to you like a victim. Oh, poor me. Bichare badbar. I'm so, poor me, right? And so this is a very common one. A lot of people like that one, and you get a lot of mileage out of that one. There's a lot of agreement that poor you, you're just such a victim. And so people relate to you like, it gets you attention, it gets you to be, you get to avoid the responsibility of your life and blame others for it. Like, I'm this way because everybody else did this to me. That's a way of being that people have trained their environment to be. There's others who are very inquisitive. They're very, I call them interrogators. They're always asking questions. Like, you've trained your environment that they better answer your questions because you've got a lot of them, and you want to know, why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? So you don't even say, honey, have you seen my car keys? You say, why'd you move my car keys? Where did you put my car keys? Right? That's an interrogator. It's an aggressive way of being that is not very loving, but it is a way of training your environment. So you and I have been training people in our lives, and we've been being trained by them. In other words, for saying that is, if training is a word that sounds funny to you, conditioning. Right? You've been conditioning the people in your life what to expect from you, and they have been conditioning you. All right, and so much of our relationships is filtered through our conditioning, and we make up our minds whether we love or don't love somebody, even based on our conditioning and based on the conditioning that they're trying to teach you how to relate to them. So what if you began teaching your world, teaching the people at the dry cleaners, teaching the people at the store, teaching the people in line, teaching the people at the bank, teaching the people that you sleep with, teaching the people that you live with every day, that you were reliably a person who could be related to in a loving way. That you actually, when people talked about you, talked about what a kind person you are, what a generous person you are, what a forgiving person you are, what a compassionate person you are. What if that's what people ended up saying about you when they talked about you, instead of whatever it is they're saying about you already? Okay? So you can begin to train yourself, and in doing so, you will begin to train your environment to relate to yourself, that one that you call you, as a source of love. Now, what happens when that happens is that you actually become that. We've had conversations on this show before, is that related to a presupposition that was put forward by a German philosopher named Heidegger. He said, I believe that we are what we pretend to be. Because if we hadn't pretended to be that, then we We couldn't pretend to be that if we weren't that already. So now that's a very shortened version of something that took 2 or 3 pages for him to say that went much, much, much deeper. But that's the meaning that I was able to extract from his elucidations. You are what you pretend. When you pretend to be loving, even when you don't feel it, but you take on the practice of tending to love. Pretending means you're just tending to something, okay? You're tending to a pretense, right? You're believing something, you're choosing to believe something, and then you are acting as if. When you act as if you are a loving person and relate to people as if you are a loving person, what ends up happening is the feelings show up. The feelings show up and start being there as a condition of your life. You can become a condition of a loving person who is simply expressing their natural state of being, but it may not start off that way. It may start off with you're just simply doing a discipline. Just like you may, I keep using the reference of the gym, but if you were not in good shape and you wanted to go to the gym, you might get some gym clothes and some gym shoes and a gym bag and maybe some of those gym gloves, right? And you may even get a trainer or not, but you would get a gym membership and you would go down to the gym and you would push on weights or run or do whatever it is that you do to get in shape. And so in a way, you would be pretending that you were somebody who exercised because up until now you haven't been, right? But now you are, and so you're pretending, or you're putting on the pretense of somebody who is doing the things that somebody who's in shape physically would do. The end result is you start being in shape. You start actually getting in shape and getting fit, and then you become something else. You have more energy, you're more alive, people relate to you as somebody who's fit and in shape, you relate to yourself as somebody who's fit and in shape, and then here's the interesting thing. You no longer do the things that you did before that got you out of shape. Maybe your diet changes or your habits change, so you no longer are doing those things, and you are now doing those things which have you be fit or in shape. Map that onto this conversation about being the source of love, actually causing and having love in your life, and you simply are doing the discipline of exercising, loving in your life, and you become that. That becomes who you are and what you do. And it becomes that. And what does it require to do that? You cannot do that halfway. You can't do it lackadaisically. You can't do it part-time. You can't do it when you feel like it. You can't just do it 3 days a week and then take the rest of the week off. It's something that you must do at all times, in all circumstances, regardless of who's present. And you will then begin to relate to yourself as that, and the surprising thing is that your life will change. This requires integrity. This requires discipline. This requires being honorable with yourself. By being honorable, I simply mean that you do what you said you'd do, when you said you would do it, and you do it whether anybody cares or not. You do it whether anybody notices or not. You do it whether it's working or not, apparently. You do it because you said you would. You honor your word as yourself. So you begin to practice the practices of a loving person, a compassionate person, because you said you would, because you honor those characteristics in yourself and in other people. And so you want to emulate that. You want to create that in your life, and you want to cause that as a way of life. Great. So that's it. That's the whole thing, really. The way to become somebody who has love in their life is to be somebody who causes love in their life. Now, if you met a person like that, would you be attracted to them? I'm going to assert that you would be. A person like that who doesn't need your love, who is the source of love, who is causing love, who's going to love you whether you love them or not, is a very attractive person. That kind of person is not worried about having friends. That kind of person is not worried about having love in their life. That kind of person is not worried about or concerned about whether or not somebody else is going to come along and give them love because they feel empty or alone. That kind of person is too busy sharing the love that they already have in their life and that kind of person is generally surrounded by people who want to be around them, who care for them, who respect them, who honor them, and in some cases would want to learn from them. Show me how you do that. How is it that you have so many friends and so much love in your life? How is it that you've had your relationship work for 20 or 30 years? How is it that whenever you come into the room, everybody lightens up and brightens up? Because you're the source of something. So, this may be an advanced conversation for some of you. Some of you may just be wondering, how can I get along with my husband or wife? How can I get a date? How can I get over somebody who's broken my heart? How can I get somebody back who I've done wrong to? How can I forgive somebody who's done me wrong? All of those are very, very valuable and valid questions. I'm here to answer those questions with you. However, I just want you to look at, where is love missing? And that if love had been present, if you could be the source of love, if the love in your life came from you, how would those situations have changed already? How would you have already found the answers that you were looking for? Some of the answers would be to questions that never needed to be asked in the first place, because those circumstances would have never showed up. To a person who's being the source of love in their life and living their life with integrity, and by integrity I simply mean not right or wrong or good or bad. I simply mean what works. What works is that you practice what you say you'll practice, and that you become the source of your own life and take responsibility for your own life. Taking responsibility for your life is a privilege. It's a pleasure. It's an honor to be responsible for your life. And you might want to ask yourself, who else would you like to be responsible for your life? So, if you're an adult. If you're an adult, do you really want anyone else responsible for your life, or would you like to make your own choices and your own decisions and pay your own consequences for your own mistakes? Would you like to learn from your own mistakes rather than have somebody else come along and pay for it so you don't learn anything and you just make the mistake again? Or would you like to be responsible for your life? Listen, responsibility is a place of power. It's the only place of power, really. When you're responsible, another way of saying that is that you're accountable for your life. When you're accountable for your life, then you have nowhere else that you need to look when things are going wrong. When things are not going so well, you can look to yourself and say, wow, how is it that I did that? I'm accountable for that. What had that show up in my own life? And you don't need anybody else to change for you in order for you to feel better. You need only look at, where did I cause this to happen in my life, and what do I need to cause to have that situation shift to something that is more tolerable, something that I can live with, something I can actually be joyous about. And when you have responsibilities for your life, well, that's a no-brainer. You only have to look over here where you are. Nobody else has to do anything or change in order for you to feel better. If you don't have responsibility for your life, if you don't want to be responsible for your life, then, get used to being alone, get used to being a victim, or get used to being in codependent relationships in which, people pretty much torture each other until it stops working. They're always temporary. They never last a lifetime, really. And the time that they do last, it's a big pain. So anyhow, let's take some calls. Hello, this is Gregory. You're live on the air.
I have a question about my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
She's a college student.
Yes.
And she always complains of not having a close friend.
Yeah.
And she usually, in her high school time and college time, she did not have many friends.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have any close friends. And how can I help her? What is the definition of I don't know. How can I give her a definition of a close friend, and what approaches she can, make to make new friends?
That's a great question. Now, can I ask you this? Most people usually have maybe 2 or 3, if you're really lucky, 5 or 6 real good close friends in their whole life.
Real good friends.
Yeah, real friends.
Yeah.
The kind that you can call in the middle of the night and say, "I need you to get over here," and they just jump up and do that. Or if they live in another country or say, I need you here, and they will come.
That's correct. I
Yeah.
think that's the
You get
kind
maybe a couple of those in your life if you're lucky, you know?
yes, I do have for myself,
Yeah.
but my daughter, she doesn't have yet, and I don't know, how I advise her to make a close friend, to have a close friend.
I understand. Well, like everything else, it's something that it takes a certain amount of skills, communication skills, right? And it takes a desire. It takes a desire to have that. A lot of people don't take time to know themselves. If your daughter's in college, I'm guessing she's like in her 20s or late teens.
Pardon me?
If your daughter is in college, I'm guessing that she must be maybe in her late teens or early 20s.
Yes, 20 years old.
Yeah, so that's a time in our life where we're not quite adult yet, anyhow, even though they say we are, but we're not truly a full-grown adult. In fact, your bones and your brain and your central nervous system continue to grow until you're about somewhere between 23 and 26. So she didn't even have a fully formed brain yet. You're still in your formation stage. However, you're entering into an adulthood, but you're still kind of a kid. And so some of those skills come with experience. And, I always say any of my knowledge comes from experience, and most of them were bad experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what happens to her, actually.
Yeah.
She have good experiences, but my thinking is she either probably didn't have the skills to make close friends, or I don't know what was it that she couldn't make any.
Well,
close
she's
friends,
still
and
in college?
The one that she had was not a good experience.
Is she still in college now?
She's still at college, yes.
All right, so it's not too late. It's not too late. It's not over. But if you were watching the beginning of the show, I was talking about generating and causing love, right? Now, that same discipline, if you will, could be simply said friendship. Generating and causing friendship. How would a good friend act? What would a good friend say? Would a good friend call?
Exactly.
Would a good friend call you and say, hey, thanks, I had a great time hanging out with you guys today? Would a good friend make sure that they never said anything that would hurt somebody else's feelings, and if they did, clean it up? Would a good friend tell the truth no matter what? These are things that each of us has to ask ourselves. I think I know the answer to those questions, but you do too, right? Good friends are some people who tell you the truth and who enjoy your company and who you can count on. Good friends are people that show up and ask, is there anything I can do to help? So there's skills.
Love and friendship is actually to show your love and offering your kindness, or I don't know.
Yeah, offering your kindness, offering your goodwill. And I'm going to say this too, as somebody who's, 40 years older than your daughter, don't expect anything. Expectations, I believe, kill friendships, and they kill love affairs as well. If you give of yourself, because that's what there is to do, that you wholeheartedly can give your love and your friendship and your caring and your compassion, and don't expect anything in return. People may or may not return it.
Okay.
Right? But when and of course you can have a preference. I hope they do, right? I want them to return it. I would be happy if they returned it, but I don't expect it. I've learned to not expect people to respond to me like I wish they would.
I think that is one of the things that probably causes problem for her, because she does expect, exact same thing in return from them. If she does some kindness to her friends.
Yeah, expectations are like weed killer on flowers. Expectations are to love and relationships like weed killer on your flower garden. It kills the flowers. If you just sprayed weed killer on your flowers, it would kill the flowers too. So there's certain things that you have a right to expect. In other words, I have a right to expect that people won't abuse me. I have a right to expect that people won't, publicly insult me and or try to embarrass me. I expect that from my friends. However, they may not do what I expect.
Yes, exactly.
They may not do that. They may do something different. And if I expect my friends to be as loving and as caring as I am, then I'm setting myself up for disappointment, and I'm setting my friend up to do something by obligation rather than because they want to.
Even if they don't know that they needed to, return something, they just didn't know. They just didn't never thought about it.
And listen, today, people are shallow. I'm sorry, but I mean, that's what I experience. People today, especially those that I'm seeing that are in the younger generation, they're very shallow. Their roots don't go so deep. They're easily upset. They're easily disappointed. They fall in love easily. They fall out of love easily. They give their heart away as if it were nothing. And they receive others' love as if it were nothing. It's like all on the surface. Now, I'm not saying that everybody is like that, but I've seen a lot of it, and it's very disappointing. And I have expectations, you see, that people will be a little deeper, a little more sincere, a little more authentic and honest with me. But if I go around expecting that of people, I just get disappointed. It would impinge upon my ability to be open and free and loving and generous in my life. So
I'd like to know, what do you expect from a close friend? Like, how can I tell her about, like, what you don't expect anything from a close friend?
Well, I expect them to be honest with me, even if it hurts. I would expect my friends to be honest with me, even if it might hurt my feelings. I would expect them to tell me the truth. That's the only real expectation I have of my friends. I don't expect them to love me. I don't expect them to respect me. And if they don't, listen, there's a consequence. If people don't respect you, there's a consequence, isn't there?
Yeah.
You go away, you withdraw, you get you're less expressive. You start withholding. That's just a natural consequence of being disrespected. You don't feel as outgoing.
That's right. I think from a close friend, she's expecting that can be with her all times or support her all times.
Nah, see, that is an unrealistic expectation, and it will kill off any possibility for love and friendship.
That's right.
Right? I don't expect my friends to support me, and I live my life so that I don't need their support. I live my life so I don't need support. I like support. I mean, I like it when if I go do something, if I say, hey, we're going to go do a seminar in Toronto or something, and all of our friends go, oh, how can I support you? What can I do? I love that. Don't get me wrong. I'm very happy about that. I'm thrilled, right? But I don't expect it. If nobody did that, I would still do it, what I've said I'm going to do. I don't go, oh, I'll be your friend if you support me. I'll come and do this if you do that. That's called making a deal. That's business. That's a business transaction. You see? I'll do this if you do that. I'll give you this if you'll give me that. That's just cutting a deal. There's no love in that. I mean, there could be, and then don't forget that we're talking about a third person, so it's hard to give you true answers. If I was speaking with her, I would try to find out what are her expectations from a friendship. If it's anything beyond, I expect them to be kind to me when I'm there, and if I offer them something that they would want to participate with me. I mean, I don't know. It's not for me to define what friendship is for you or anyone else or your daughter. However, there are certain things that people do that kind of kill off friendship, and expecting them to be there for you, to have your back. You can expect that all you want, but if they don't do it and that costs the friendship, then,
Yes, I agree.
Now, I can think of some friends that I've had that I really, for, 10 years, I looked back on it at one point and I thought, I've babysat their kids. I've been there when they said, hey, listen, I need to talk to you because I'm not getting along with my wife or my husband, and I would drive my car over and go walk with them or sit with them and talk with them and give them my time and love and energy, run things around town for them as a favor because they were stuck. I invited them to virtually every event that I've ever had at my house, whether it was a birthday or Christmas or whatever. And when I looked back, I realized I'd been at their house maybe 4 or 5 times, and some of those times was to offer them help for something.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? I thought, this is kind of a one-sided friendship. I feel like I'm giving 200% and I'm getting back about 5%, and it's just not a good deal. Now, I don't love them any less. I still care for them. I just don't hang out with them anymore.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just too one-sided. Yeah, now if that happened once or twice, it'd be okay, but over a 10-year period, you kind of get tired of it. You know, it's kind of like, wait a minute, this is not a friendship, you know?
Yes, that's true.
Right. I'm being a friend and they're not, so, you know, I feel kind of like a sucker after a while, and it's like, it's no fun for me. So I'm going to go hang out with people that want to return my friendship, you know?
Thank you very much.
Well, I
have
appreciate
taken
your call.
some notes, and it definitely helped. I'll talk to her.
Well, I appreciate your calling. Thank you for watching. So that was perfect because it is about practicing the practices that would cause people to want to be with you, people to, it doesn't mean that there's not going to be people that'll take advantage of your friendship and not return it, but you need to do it without any conditions. You do it because you said you would do it. That's what the honor and integrity is about.